There was a pond about half a mile from my old house that I used to visit for fishing. It was called Daryl's Pond. I never knew who Daryl was or why it had that name, but since nobody owned it, people would occasionally fish there. Most of the time, though, it was just me. I had set up a pole on the shore to tie my small kayak to whenever I went out. It was around 3 p.m. when I paddled to the middle of the pond, the sweet spot for catching fish. As I settled in, I noticed someone emerging from the trees. I waved and smiled as he made his way to a small boat at the water's edge. He climbed in and started rowing toward me. When he got close, I tried to strike up a conversation without sounding intrusive. "Perfect day, isn't it?" I said. "Yeah, absolutely," he replied, his tone flat. The awkward silence that followed was uncomfortable. I felt an unspoken pressure to keep the conversation going. "So, are you here to fish?" I asked. "No, I don't actually fish," he said. "Oh well," I replied. "It's still a nice day to relax on the water." As he kept rowing, his boat collided with mine with a dull thud. A wave of unease washed over me. He didn't seem threatening, but something about him felt off. I was 24 at the time. This guy looked like he was in his late 40s or early 50s. I tried to focus on fishing, but my attention was elsewhere. I could feel him staring at me, even as I turned my head slightly away. When I glanced to my right, my suspicions were confirmed. He was staring. Trying to regain control of the situation, I locked eyes with him. After a few seconds, he looked away. "So, where are you from?" I asked. He pointed behind him toward the wooded hill near the dirt road. "Oh, you live by Suffolk?" I asked. No, I'm not," he replied cryptically. "What brought you out here?" I pressed. "Why not?" he said, his responses short and dismissive. The tension grew with every passing moment. He didn't say much, didn't do much, just sat there with a faint smile, occasionally looking at me. My heart raced. The stillness of the pond, surrounded by trees in every direction, suddenly felt oppressive. Trying to stay calm, I began paddling toward the shore under the pretense of finding a better spot to fish. But when I glanced back, I realized he was following me. "Great day, huh?" I said, forcing cheerfulness despite the shake in my voice. As I neared the edge of the pond, I decided to leave. "I think I'm going to call it a day," I said. I turned to gauge his reaction. His smile was gone, replaced with a chilling seriousness. "I can't let you leave," he said, lifting his flannel to reveal a handgun tucked into his jeans. Adrenaline surged through me. Without thinking, I leapt out of my kayak and ran for the shore, sprinting the half-mile uphill through the woods to my house. Once inside, I locked every door and window, shutting the blinds and leaving only a small crack to keep watch on the yard. As night fell, I sat in the dark, peeking through the blinds, waiting. My paranoia finally eased when it seemed clear I hadn't been followed. I left my bedroom windows open to let the air in. Being on the second floor, I wasn't worried about being seen. About half an hour after lying down, I heard leaves crunching outside. My body froze. Normally, I'd dismiss it as an animal, but not this time. Then I heard a voice. "Hey, buddy," it called. "You up there? Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." It was him. I recognized the voice instantly. I stayed silent, barely breathing. Moving as quietly as I could, I slipped out of my room and crept downstairs to the kitchen. Grabbing the phone, I crawled low to avoid being seen through the windows. Finally, I called 911. Huddled in my bedroom, whispering into the phone, I waited for what felt like an eternity. Every creak, every shadow outside made my heart pound. I braced for the sound of breaking glass, the thud of the back door, or worse, his voice again. When the police arrived, they searched the property and surrounding woods but found nothing. They advised me to stay with someone for a few days, which I did. Though I never saw or heard from the man again, the experience haunted me. A month later, I moved to a new place. Even now, I prefer fishing by the bay, somewhere open, with plenty of people around. One time, I went on a fishing trip with my brother-in-law, Jack, a few of his friends, and my sister. Jack came from London and always had an easy life, and since marrying him, my sister had been living the same way. I packed everything I'd need for a night on his boat into a small backpack and drove out to his house in the wealthier part of town. His place was right by the bay, literally in his backyard. A pre-built wooden dock stretched out to his luxurious boat, which had Lexi painted on the side, my sister's name. Jack said he got the idea from Forrest Gump. The guy was living the dream life, no doubt about it. We set sail early in the morning. Jack had packed a ridiculous amount of food, including hamburger meat, because of course his boat had a barbecue grill installed. Everything about his life screamed excess, and honestly, it was kind of infuriating. A few hours in, though, the trip wasn't as fun as I'd hoped. We'd only caught one largemouth bass, Jack's catch, naturally, and everyone else was getting drunk. I asked my sister if I could have a drink, but she scolded me, reminding me I was only 17. Her nagging made me question why I'd even agreed to come along. The only part I enjoyed was relaxing and tanning on the back deck of Jack's unnecessarily large boat. As the sun set, the sky turned a vibrant orange. Jack fired up the grill for burgers, which seemed strange since we had fresh fish. But I preferred burgers, so I didn't complain. By the time we finished eating, it was dark. There's something both calming and unsettling about being in the middle of the ocean at night. It's like being in space, isolated, surrounded by endless nothingness, and entirely reliant on your vessel to survive. Everyone was now either drunk or high, blasting music and laughing loudly. Eventually, they invited me to play Cards Against Humanity inside. With nothing better to do, I joined them. An extra beer sat on the counter by the small bar, so I grabbed it. At this point, I didn't care anymore, and my sister wasn't sober enough to nag me. After a few beers, I felt buzzed and finally started to enjoy myself. I had to lower the music because it was so loud I couldn't hear myself think. Jack and his buddies were completely wasted, while my sister, drunker than I'd ever seen her, was still slightly more coherent than the rest. It seemed harmless enough, just a group of adults having fun on a secluded boat in calm waters, far from land. Then, something unexpected happened. Over the now muted music, I heard a noise coming from outside. One of Jack's friends noticed it too. I turned the music off completely. The faint sound of voices calling for help reached us. We rushed out to the side of the boat. Peering over the edge, we saw a smaller boat with two men, both Indian, looking up at us. I asked what was wrong. One of them explained they were out of food and gas and needed help. Everyone else on board was far too intoxicated to make a decision, leaving me to figure out what to do. Jack, clumsy from drinking, stumbled as he tried to grab the ladder, dropping his beer in the process. I decided we couldn't ignore two stranded people, so I helped him attach the ladder to the railing. The men climbed aboard, thanking us profusely. Inside, Jack grabbed the leftover burgers, and the men devoured them. I couldn't shake the unease I felt, though. Jack handed them a jerry can of gasoline, and after thanking us again, they climbed back down the ladder and left. I felt a little better watching them sail away. That night, we all went to bed. Jack and my sister took the bedroom, while I was stuck on a pull-out couch with his two friends. It was rock hard, and after an hour of tossing and turning, I gave up on sleep. I got up to grab a drink and use the bathroom. Jack had told us to pee into the ocean to conserve water on the boat. Stepping outside, I expected the peaceful sound of the ocean. Instead, I heard a faint motor and splashing water. The pitch-black surroundings made it impossible to see the source. I climbed to the controls and flipped on the searchlight. Slowly, I scanned the water. Nothing. Another sweep. Still nothing. Then, as I turned the light nearly full circle, I saw it. The small boat from earlier was approaching us. At that exact moment, a blood-curdling scream echoed from below deck. I rushed back inside. One of Jack's friends stood frozen in the corner, while the other had just woken up, startled by the scream. Jack and my sister burst out of their bedroom to see what was going on. The friend in the corner stammered, barely forming words, saying he'd seen two figures standing over him before they bolted out the front door. Stepping outside, I expected the peaceful sound of the ocean. Instead, I heard a faint motor and splashing water. The pitch-black surroundings made it impossible to see the source. I climbed to the controls and flipped on the searchlight. Slowly, I scanned the water. Nothing. Another sweep. Still nothing. Then, as I turned the light nearly full circle, I saw it. The small boat from earlier was approaching us. At that exact moment, a blood-curdling scream echoed from below deck. I rushed back inside. One of Jack's friends stood frozen in the corner, while the other had just woken up, startled by the scream. Jack and my sister burst out of their bedroom to see what was going on. The friend in the corner stammered, barely forming words, saying he'd seen two figures standing over him before they bolted out the front door. When I was 21 years old, I went fishing with my 84-year-old grandfather for the first time. We drove for about an hour from our suburban home to a remote part of the state. My grandfather always went to this one particular lake, a hidden gem that no one else seemed to know about. According to him, it was a spot where he always left with coolers full of fish. My grandpa was a serious fisherman, and it showed. Even on the car ride, he was rattling off all these fishing terms I didn't understand. He talked nonstop about techniques, bait, and water conditions. I just nodded along, hoping I'd catch on eventually. When we reached the end of the quiet road, he turned onto a dirt trail, and we bumped along for 2 miles before finally stopping. He parked his Jeep at the side of the trail, and we unloaded the small boat, hauling it through a patch of dense forest. At 84 years old, my grandfather was surprisingly strong. I struggled to keep up, trying not to show how winded I was. There was no way I'd ask for a break. That would have been humiliating, especially if he could outlast me. Skipping ahead to when we were finally in the boat, my grandpa had just finished teaching me how to cast the line and hook into the water. After that, he went quiet, his attention fixed on what he was doing. He had this intense focus that made me hesitant to interrupt. After a while, I turned around to ask him a question. He didn't respond, though. He was leaning in closer to the water, staring at something. At first, I thought he might be concentrating on a fish or something beneath the surface. But when I glanced back at him about 20 seconds later, he was leaning in even further. Something about the way he moved made me uneasy. I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder, about to ask if he was okay. That's when I heard splashing, loud and sudden. Before I could process what was happening, my grandfather pushed something back into the water with all his strength. Then, he turned to me and yelled at the top of his lungs, "Paddle! Paddle as fast as you can!" My heart was pounding as I grabbed the oars and rowed back toward the shore, adrenaline surging through me. I didn't know what had just happened, but I could tell it was bad. As soon as the boat hit the dirt, my grandfather scrambled out and sprinted toward the car, moving faster than I thought he was capable of at his age. I followed him, confused and panicked. We left everything behind, the boat, the fishing gear, everything. As soon as we got to the car, he floored it, speeding down the dirt trail. I kept yelling at him, begging him to tell me what was going on, but he stayed silent, gripping the wheel tightly. 10 minutes into the drive, he finally spoke. His voice was shaky as he said, "I was looking into the water. I saw something. It was getting closer to the surface. At first I wasn't sure what it was, but as it got clearer, I swear it looked like a face. It kept coming closer, and as I leaned in to get a better look, something reached out and grabbed me." That was all he would say that day. For weeks, I tried to get more out of him, but he only opened up once. He described what he saw as best he could, though his words didn't make it any less eerie. From what he said, it sounded almost like a human face. Almost. The line that stuck with me the most was what he said at the end. "All I know is, it wasn't no